Good evening, everyone, and welcome to 30 minutes of Torah study for the Torah portion of Tseitsei. We will begin with a brief overview of the Torah portion. 74 of the Torah's 613 mitzvahs are in this parsha. These include the laws of the beautiful captive, the inheritant rights of the firstborn, the wayward and rebellious son, burial and dignity of the dead, returning a lost object, sending away the mother bird before taking her young, the duty to erect a safety fence around the roof of one's home, and the various forms of forbidden plant and animal hybrids. Also recounted are the judicial procedures and penalties for adultery, for the rape or seduction of an unmarried girl, and for a husband who falsely accuses his wife of infidelity. The following cannot marry a person of Jewish lineage: a mamzer, which is someone born from an adulterous or incestuous relationship; a male of Moabite or Ammonite descent; a first or second generation Edomite or Egyptian. Also included are laws governing the purity of the military camp, the prohibition against turning in an escaped slave, the duty to pay a worker on time and to allow anyone working for you, man or animal, to eat on the job, the proper treatment of a debtor, and the prohibition against charging interest on a loan, the laws of divorce, from which are also derived many of the laws of marriage. The penalty of 39 lashes for transgression of a Torah prohibition, and the procedure for yibum, a levirate marriage of the wife of a deceased to his childless brother, or chalitza, removing of the shoe, in the case that his brother-in-law does not wish to marry her. Tseitsei concludes with the obligation to remember what Amalek did to you on the road on your way out of Egypt. So, as we mentioned in the overview, the Parsha discusses the Jewish way of getting married. Now, many cultures around the world have very beautiful wedding ceremonies. Some of them involve the bride and the groom expressing vows to each other, pledges of undying love, incredible commitment and dedication. There's quite a bit of romance. A Jewish wedding, a little bit different. No declarations of love, no pledges, no vows, yet there is a spirituality there. There's a very powerful energy that's present at a Jewish wedding, and there's layers and layers of meaning to every step and every moment, and we'll discuss a few of those tonight. We'll begin with a text from the Talmud, which outlines the 3 different ways that a person can get married. The Talmud says a woman can be betrothed by one of 3 methods: exchange of monetary value, a bill of marriage, and intimate relations. What does this mean practically? Number 1, this has to be done in front of witnesses. If you do not have kosher witnesses, it does not count. If you have 2 witnesses, kosher witnesses, a man can give to a woman something that is worth some money, it has a monetary value, and say, with this, I am betrothing you to me, and they are going to be betrothed, essentially married. Option number 2, he could write that on a piece of paper. You could have a contract which says, with this piece of paper in front of the witnesses, you are going to be betrothed to me, and they're going to be married. Option number 3 is that in front of witnesses, the man and the woman will say, I'm going to have intimate relations with you for the sake and purpose of being married, and they would be married. However, the second and the third method, the method of getting married with a contract and the method of getting married through intimate relations, fell out of fashion. They're no
Is this
longer,
instead of a regular Jewish wedding? Is that all you have to do?
it's not instead of a Jewish wedding. This is part of the Jewish wedding.
Okay.
The one of these 3 that is the primary part of the Jewish wedding today is giving the woman something that is of monetary value. Let's go to the source in the Torah. Where do we find these things in the Torah? This week's Torah portion. Okay, we did this already. All right. The Torah says, when a man betroths a woman and has relations with her, and it will be if she does not find favor in his eyes, because he discovered in her an immoral matter, he will write a bill of divorce, place it in her hand, and send her away from his home. The oral interpretation says, within this text, within this verse, we find the three different ways that a person can get married. How do we see them? Number one, the Torah says, when a man betroths a woman, the Hebrew word used in this verse for betrothed is the word yikach. The word yikach is the same word which always implies a financial transaction. Therefore, when the Torah says when a man betroths a woman, it means through financial means. Then the Torah says, and he has relations with her. What does this tell us? This tells us that a person can get married through having intimate relations with a woman. Again, that would have to be their witnesses who you proclaim that you're going to have relations for the purpose of marriage. And finally, it says in the verse, he will write a bill of divorce. Just as you get out of a marriage through a written document, so too you could get into a marriage through a written document. So this is the biblical source for the three different ways that a person can enter into a Jewish marriage. Being that the one that's used today is the monetary one, not the contract and the intimacy, how exactly does it work? Let's go into the code of Jewish law for the instructions on how to get married Jewishly. That's okay. He gives her a coin or the value of a coin before two witnesses and declares, you are hereby betrothed to me by this. Gloss, this is the comment of the Ramah. He writes, some add the following words in accordance with the laws of Moshe and Israel. This is appropriate. It is customary to betroth with the ring, and there is a reason for this as explained in Tikkun Zohar. So if you go to a Jewish wedding today, how does it work? The groom gives the bride something of value, right? The tradition is to give her a gold ring, and you say the phrase, you are hereby betrothed to me by this, in accordance with the laws of Moshe and Israel. Right? This takes place under the chuppah. That's how a Jewish wedding takes place. Why a ring? Why a ring? You could use a coin, right? You could use money, you could use art, you could use clothing. Why is the tradition a ring? So there are a few answers, right? One is a Kabbalistic answer, right? One that I know Avi would enjoy tremendously. A ring is in a circular shape. That circular shape represents the spiritual energy of Keser. This is a transcendent, sublime energy, and that ring draws down the infinite blessings of God to the bride and groom. Therefore, we use a ring. Another reason, the shape of a circle has no beginning, has no end. It continues for eternity. So too, the idea is you get married, you're underneath the chuppah, you give a ring. The ring represents the eternal nature of the commitment of the marriage that you're hoping is going to take place. However, the last reason is absolutely my favorite. According to Jewish law, the man has to give her something of value that it becomes hers. You give it to her, she owns it, right? She is now the owner of this ring. However, what happens when a man marries a woman? Essentially, all of her possessions become his possessions, right? All of a sudden, there's like a joint bank account taking place. So if you give her the ring, you know what happens? It's not hers, now it belongs to him. So it's not a real marriage. What does Jewish law tell you? All of a wife's jewelry belongs to the wife, not to the man at all. So if the man would give her some other item, he could say, it's really mine the whole time. What's my wife is mine too. However, that does not apply to jewelry. You give a jewelry to your wife, that's your wife's jewelry. So therefore, we give a ring under the chuppah. So Jewish tradition is we get married with a gold ring under the chuppah. Now, it's interesting that other cultures also use a ring. Is it possible that the origin of getting married with a ring actually comes from Judaism? That I don't know, but something interesting certainly to think about. All right, so far we have discussed that there are three different ways in how to get married. However, there's only one that we use on a practical level. What is the deeper significance of this ring ceremony? If we only use this one and not the other two, there must be something special about it. It must have some type of quality more than the others. What's the deeper significance of the ring ceremony? And question number two, what can this ceremony teach us about becoming better Jews? From everything that we see and experience in life, we want to learn something out. How can I be better? What does the Jewish wedding ceremony centered around a ring tell us about how we can become better Jews? So we need to explore all three methods of getting married from a deeper perspective. So we begin with the idea that marriage is not just a concept between a man and a woman. Marriage also is a perfect metaphor for the relationship between the Jewish people and God. Shlomo HaMelech, right, King Solomon, he wrote an entire book of the Bible called Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, which describes how the relationship between God and the Jewish people is full of the love, the connection, the intimacy, the ups and downs, just like a relationship between a husband and wife is the relationship between God and the Jewish people. When is the marriage? The marriage took place at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. What this means is that the three different ways that a husband and wife, a man and woman, can get married to each other is a reflection of three different stages, three different levels of how the Jewish people can relate to and be connected to God. So let's look at all three levels, but before we do, important point to mention. In Hebrew, how do you say money? Kesef, right? We say kesef. Kesef means money. The word kesef is etymologically related to the word kosef, which means yearning and desire. So they're actually quite interchangeable. Now look at the text and see it in the text. This text is from Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. He writes, God is described as a man in the Torah. As the verse states, God, the man of war. The Jewish people are the woman. This is the deeper meaning of the Mishnah statement. A woman is betrothed to her husband. The Jewish people can be betrothed to God, as it were, in three ways. The first is through money, the dimension of kindness. These are the early days of life when God in his abundant kindness supports us. In return, we yearn, desire, and are passionate about his Torah and his worship. This is called the first phase of greatness. At some point in life, this phase fades, and we enter the phase of smallness, the second phase. In this phase, we don't desire or yearn for God. However, our contract compels us to remain connected with him. Our contract is the words of the Torah that we study and the words of our prayers. As our minds engage in the words of Torah and prayer, we revert to delighting with God. This is the third phase, which is described metaphorically as intimate relations. This is our second marriage. So now let's review this text. The Baal Shem Tov explained to us how each of these three steps of a marriage reflect three levels of our relationship with God. Step number one is money, the financial one. Why? Kesef corresponds to the word yearning, desire. The early stages in a relationship, where there's excitement, where there's passion, where the person wants to do anything to spend time with their beloved. That is the early stages of the relationship, which corresponds to getting married with money. That's the monetary exchange. The second stage of the marriage is maybe things are not as exciting and as passionate as they were before. The challenges of life, the obstacles of life, making a living, having kids, all the financial responsibilities are there. The yearning might not be what it once was. What is there left? Commitment. There's commitment, there's dedication. This is reflected in a marriage that was entered into through a contract. And finally, we have level number three. Level number three represents where there's absolute delight, pleasure, closeness, intimacy between a husband and wife. This corresponds to intimacy between a husband and wife. So these three levels of stages of a marriage reflect also our relationship with God. There is a level of relationship with God where we yearn to be close to God. We desire to be close to God. We don't care if we have to leave early from work in order to observe Shabbos. We will do whatever it takes to be together with our beloved, to be together with Hashem. The second stage is when it's not always so easy to be a Jew. We have many obligations in life, and sometimes we do it out of duty, out of responsibility, because we have entered into a contract with Hashem. Then finally, there's the third level, ultimate spiritual intimacy, the greatest possible delight and pleasure within our relationship with God. If you would look at these three levels, which one of these three do you think should be the primary one, the one that we aspire to, the one that we base our life on? You might think it would be intimacy, delight, pleasure. However, that's not the case. What is the one that we utilize? We get married with a monetary exchange. Why? Because the preferred option of entering into a relationship with our spouse and entering into a relationship with God is represented by monetary exchange, which is yearning, desire, the ability to overcome any and all obstacles to be together. Let's look how the Rebbe describes it in the next text. Based on all that we learned, we will understand why it is Jewish tradition to consecrate marriage with the monetary method. It is because the inner dimension of betrothal, the unification and attachment of Jews and God, is primarily linked to kesef, money, which also connotes yearning. This is in line with the well-known phrase, yearned I have yearned, which describes our love for God. The main purpose of this love and yearning is to consecrate our bond and connection with God, for there is no worship like the worship of love. Kesef means longing. Kesef means desire. It means I want to be together with you no matter the circumstances. You feel you need to move to Australia. I am moving to Australia because I desire to be with you. I want to be there. Whatever it takes, I am yours. You are mine. That is what this represents, and this is what it means. So the ring was chosen because of all three phases. Yearning for God is the most important. It pushes us to go beyond our limits. In order for us to grow, we have to go out of our comfort zone. You go out of your comfort zone in a marriage, in a relationship. You have to go out of your comfort zone when it comes to your relationship with God. And this is what it means to get married, right, with the ring. Because the ring represents that critical key element that we need to maintain and to have in our marriage and also in our relationship with God. Okay, we'll get to this one in a second. All right. Now let's continue our exploration of marriage and look at the ceremony on a little bit of a deeper level. There are, in fact, two elements that take place with the marriage, and those are spelled out very clearly in the blessings that the rabbi makes before the ring is put on the woman's finger. Step number one is there is a commitment to each other. When the groom says underneath the chuppah, that you are becoming betrothed to me, it's a statement of affection, it's a statement of love, it's a statement of unity. I am singling you out from amongst all of the women in the world, and we are going to become one together. However, there is a corresponding thing taking place at exactly the same time. Not only are you singling the other person out for closeness, but you are excluding themselves from others. So there is an inclusion that's taking place, but there is also an exclusion that's taking place. You are including this person in your life, and you are excluding every single other one from that intimate relationship. Let's look at the way the Rogatchover Gaon explains it. Okay, so in the ring ceremonies, the giving of the ring, which is the love, and the bonding, there's accepting the ring, which is choosing the exclusivity of the relationship. In reality, the act of betrothal establishes two legal facts. They belong to each other, and they are forbidden to all others. Just like a divorce establishes these facts in reverse, they are released from each other and are permitted to marry others. In the act of betrothal, the two facts are established in the following manner. The bride's acceptance of the ring renders them forbidden to others. The groom's giving of the ring binds them to each other. Right? He is essentially saying with the giving of the ring, I want to belong to you. Do you want to belong to me? This is not just a legal phraseology, right? It's not just a legal formal declaration. This statement actually sets the tone for what a real marriage is all about. Not just love, affection, and closeness, but exclusivity, exclusion of others. What do we mean by that? If you are in a relationship with your spouse and you say, I love you, but I also love other things, right? I also love football, and if it's a choice between football and you, sometimes football is going to win. Not every time, it depends who's playing, but sometimes football is going to win. This is not a recipe for a successful marriage. Yes, you have the inclusion. Yes, you have love, you have affection, and you have closeness, but a person also has to exclude anything that gets in the way of that relationship. That relationship has to be number one. That relationship has to be primary. We cannot forget to exclude things that interfere, that distract, that get in the way of a meaningful relationship with our spouse. The exact same principle applies to our relationship with God, because these relationships mirror each other. Look how the Rebbe explains in text number 10. A betrothal between husband and wife is comprised of two dimensions, the belonging and the exclusivity. So is our betrothal to God. We must be A, attached to God, and B, detached from anything that can obscure this relationship that is craving worldly pleasures. So here we are told that in order to have a healthy relationship with Hashem, we have to exclude from our life things that distract us from the relationship. What is an example of that? Worldly pleasures. What does that mean, worldly pleasures? Well, we have from Rabbeinu Bach ibn Pakuda, right? Oh, sorry, we have I skipped the text here. All right. As these two dimensions must operate concurrently in a human betrothal, you can't have one without the other. So it is in our relationship with God. Both must prevail concurrently. So Rabach ibn Pakuda writes in the Chelos Lavavos, it's impossible for our hearts to be simultaneously consumed with the love of God and the love of the world. What does that mean? It means something very, very simple. A person has to have priorities in life. Your spouse is your number one priority. There are many things in life that have value and have importance and can bring meaning and pleasure to your life, but they cannot get in the way of your relationship, right? What really matters to you? What pushes you? What pulls you? What causes you to experience powerful emotions? If there are things outside of your spouse, they are getting in the way. I give the example of football. So I'm a huge football fan. Love football. What's more important, my wife or football? If I feel more disappointed because I can't watch a football game, then I would feel disappointed if a date night with my wife got canceled. That is a big problem. That's a big problem. Yes, you could like football. Yes, you could like all kinds of other things, but there has to be priorities, right? There has to be an exclusivity. There's a relationship there that nothing else can penetrate. And the same thing applies to our relationship with Hashem. The same thing applies to our relationship with God. If we worship something worldly, we can't worship God. If we worship our job more than Shabbos, we got a problem. Right? If we worship, right, cheap restaurant foods, right, cheeseburger, anything else like that, more than God, that's a problem when it comes to our relationship with Hashem. But if we have that exclusive relationship with God, that's our priority, It doesn't matter what the other things that can be appealing and be attractive in life, we're able to dismiss them, we're able to overcome them, especially if we have that element of yearning and desire in our relationship with God. But now I ask you this question, you have to think very carefully. In what year of marriage does your spouse become a priority? When should your spouse become a priority? Which year? Is there a special year? Right, Avi, being that your microphone is on, you can tell us. What do you think? What
Should be
year?
right from the beginning. I don't understand the
Absolutely,
what year? Right away.
absolutely, but not just right away, even before right away.
Oh,
Does your wife become a priority after the chuppah? What about the week before the chuppah?
I
She's
assume when you
probably
get
not going to,
engaged,
huh? Sorry, Avi?
when you get engaged,
She's probably not going to join you under that chuppah unless you express to her that she is going to be a priority in your life. Just as that has to be expressed to your spouse even before you're married. Same thing when it comes to our relationship with Hashem. Even before we are perfect Jews, which I don't know if that's possible. I think every Jew is perfect already. But even before you become that perfect Jew in observance of Torah and mitzvahs, there has to be that feeling, that declaration of priority. Let's see how the Rebbe expresses this in text number 12a. Before you can arouse your love and yearning for God, you must first be divorced from your cravings for worldly pleasures. First shun what is wrong, then do what is good. Right? Just as in your relationship with your spouse, you're proposing, you make it clear to her that sports will not have a priority over her, and bowling is not going to have a priority over her, and any going out for beers with your friend is not going to have a priority over her. You have to make that clear. This method is the orderly, measured approach. Logic dictates that we must overcome our love and craving for worldly pleasures before we can worship God as well. So just as with our spouse, this is the way our relationships are supposed to be. In the same way is our relationship supposed to be with Hashem. To pledge, to dedicate, exclusivity, that what is of most value, of biggest priority, Shabbos and kosher and Yom Kippur and marrying Jewish and all things of this nature. But we know that it's never too late. If you're not perfect in a marriage, God willing, you do what you need to do, everything is going to work out. The same thing, hopefully. But with God, we know for sure we have the mitzvah of tshuva, that no matter what takes place, no matter what happens, we have the ability to recommit ourselves, to return ourselves to that chuppah, to that status of love and yearning at any time and in any moment. All right, let's conclude with the famous 4 questions. Question number 1, what did we learn tonight? Right? We learned about the importance of our relationship with Hashem, that it mirrors the different types of ways of entering a marriage. The ideal manner is yearning, desire. That's the fuel of a marriage that allows you to overcome all challenges, obstacles, to be together, to stay together. The same thing should be with our relationship with Hashem. Then we concluded with the idea that a marriage is not just inclusion, but it's also exclusion of things that can distract and things that can get in the way. Question number 2 is, what would your life look like, your marriage and your relationship with God, if it was filled with this yearning, this desire that you want to be with your spouse, you want to be with God, you want to be with Torah mitzvahs, no matter what else is kind of out there in life. Right? Imagine what your relationship would look like if you truly excluded from your life the things that distracted you and took you away from your relationship with your spouse. How meaningful would that relationship be? How close would it be? How real would it be? How powerful would it be? Question number 3, what is holding you back? Right? What are the things in life that prevent you from having the ideal relationship with your spouse and as well as the ideal relationship with God? And question number 4 is, what can I do today to improve this? What is a practical step in the real world that I can do to improve the relationship with my spouse, to make that one of top priority, of intense focus with my spouse, and of course with our relationship with Hashem. What can we do to demonstrate that commitment and that dedication? Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the class. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, be very happy to hear. If you want,
You're sure working hard and trying to convert us to being Jews.
but I'm trying all the information here, right? I'm trying to practice it in my real in real life. So you can ask Chava, right, how I'm doing. You can ask Chava how I'm doing. See if we're putting this all into practice, right? You can also ask God how I'm doing too. We'll see what God has to say. We'll see what God has to say.